We are live.
Awesome.
Welcome, everyone. We'll wait another couple minutes and until everyone joins. So grab a coffee, get comfortable. We have a interesting conversation ahead of us. Maybe you can quickly type in where you're from in the chat window, so we see where everyone is tuning in from. Myself, I'm tuning in from Zurich as usual. Maybe you, Greg, where are you
I'm
tuning? You're
I'm here in San Jose, California.
yeah, and it's an interesting time because it's like 1:30 a.m. for Greg. So kudos
I'll be
to
going
you.
to bed after this. Yeah.
Cool. We have Daniela and Leonard from Vienna, Elisabetta from Milan. Hello, Sally from London. Welcome, everyone. Cool. Okay, I think we start. So welcome. For those of you who haven't tuned in to a Fireside Chat yet, this is kind of a new format where we interview the movers and shakers of the UX and product design scene from all over the world and sort of look under the hood of the daily practice and try to squeeze out some thought-provoking ideas of these luminaries. Okay, so
Very kind words.
yeah. Well, we'll hear a lot more from you in a bit. The sort of theme of today is how to design your own career in product design and UX. Greg has quite some experience in that. He tried quite a few things in his career journey so far. So how this will work, we have about a 45 minutes conversation. And when you have questions, you can just type it in the chat window on the right, where some of the people have already started chatting, and we'll answer the questions at the end in the Q&A part. So yeah, quick intro to who's who. I'm your host, Sandro. I'm head of marketing at Testing Time. Testing Time is a Europe-wide participant recruiting service. We have 250K test users in our pool. And so you can basically go online, define your target group, and we'll send you test user participants for either remote studies or in-house, in-home, all of that. We do this not alone, but with in collaboration with Tech Circus. Tech Circus is an event organizer and sort of community based in London. They have a new event series that they start, which is called the E-Commerce Design Summit. This is also sponsored by the experience design agency Big Light. The conference will be taking place on April 4th and 5th, and will be dedicated to showcasing the impact of experience-led product strategy and design in the building of successful, especially about retail, travel, and leisure e-commerce platforms. So for those of you who don't have a ticket yet, it's pretty soon, but you can head over to E-Commerce Design Summit. Let me maybe quickly paste the link in there so you can check it out. So especially for all of you who are working in e-commerce, you can check it out there. Just paste it in the chat. Also, our guest today will be speaking there, but we'll go into that a little bit later. So my guest today is Greg Tariff. He's the Senior Product Design Manager at Groupon. And yeah, welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing right now, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, well, it's 1:30 a.m. here in California, but I'm sticking through, and we're gonna get through this. And I promise I had some coffee, so I'll be good to go. So yeah, I'm the senior manager of product design here at Groupon. I'm based out of our San Francisco Bay Area offices. I lead charge on the discovery and engagement team. So basically top of funnel, everything before a deal page or checkout. That is what my team is responsible for. And then on the flip side of that, I also kind of work as a liaison for design, representing design with various executives when it comes to strategy and innovation. So when there's a new initiative that's inbound from them, I'll help them kind of identify exactly what it is that they're trying to achieve, say it's a prototype of a new experience they want to test. And then I will figure out, outside of just my own discovery and engagement team, with the entire design department at large, I will identify who is the best fit based on their current experience within the product itself and how it relates to that new initiative.
Cool. Such an interesting and diverse job as well.
Cool.
But we were talking a bit about beforehand. You have a pretty interesting journey on how you got to your current job, and I'd be delighted for you to go into a bit of detail on all the stuff you did to get where you are today, to get some inspiration for the people that are.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting journey to where I am today. It was a roller coaster of emotions along the way. And what's interesting is I had an opportunity to work for many great companies really fast. And the reason for that was actually due to the status of the economy at that time. So when I started my career, the economy had crashed, right? Which is not something you want to be encountering being fresh out of college. It's like, oh my God, am I going to even find a job? And so I had to be hungry and I had to move fast. And I had to act upon what my options were. So what happened was, I'll never forget this. I got a full firsthand taste of what it was going to be like to be an adult and working when I was an intern. So the year before I graduated college, I interned for General Motors. And it was an amazing experience. We were in their design center. And what happened, I'll never forget, the head of the design studio for the intern program walked in and said, "You guys may be our last intern group we ever have." And at that very moment, I started witnessing every Thursday, if your badge, your key, your like a little name badge, right, for the company, if it did not work on a Thursday, that meant you were let go.
Oh God. Okay.
And so witnessing that firsthand, I mean, obviously they're not gonna, fire an intern, but witnessing that firsthand was very real. And I got a very real taste of what life is like outside of school. So after that summer internship, obviously I went back to, finish my last year of college. And again, it was just very hard to find even any sort of full-time job, let alone an internship at that time. It was just a really poor economy. So what happened was I ended up landing an internship, thankfully, at a global ad agency by the name of FCB. Formerly, they were known as Draft FCB. And I had interned there. And during my internship, again, I witnessed they lost a major client. They cleared out an entire floor of their building, right, of employees. And here I am as an intern, hoping to get hired on full time. And they were working with me. And of course, obviously, full time wasn't even an option for a junior level designer at that time. And so they gave me, I think it was like 3 months of a contract position, right? At least I could get some experience on my resume. And so I did that. So that was in New York City after my internship with them. And then I jumped over to another ad agency by the name of Gray. And again, it was another like 3 or 6 month contract, because at a junior level, fresh out of school, all you could find was contract positions with a down economy. But what I learned was I had to be hungry. I had to keep, hustling and try to find that next job. And I'll never forget, I was staying with my cousins in New Jersey. And obviously, as a contractor, you're paid by the hour. And so you want to put in as many hours as possible. And so I would work late. And if I worked too late, I would miss a specific bus to get me home. And then that meant I had like a 1 or 2 mile walk, at like 10 p.m. to get to where they lived. And I remember I looked up at the stars and I said, it can't get any worse than this. It has to get better. And it did. So what ended up happening, I landed a full-time job as an interactive designer at a company called BFG Interactive, which was located in South Carolina, Hilton Head, South Carolina, of all places. It wasn't in a major city. And they were doing a lot of cool work. And what happened was I was, started my career in the advertising and marketing side because that's all I really knew. The iPhone was kind of fairly new. And so when this opportunity came to be an interactive designer, I was like, that's where the money's going to be. I was like, that's where I want to be. So I jumped on the opportunity, moved to South Carolina. And that's something I suggest to anybody who's starting their career is go wherever the job is. Don't be picky on location early in your career. You can be picky once you have the experience. So if you're only wanting to work.
How do you choose the job though? What?
There wasn't many opportunities.
There was just not any opportunities, so you would jump. Okay, yeah.
There was and there wasn't. What's interesting is also to network like crazy, right? Yeah. So what was interesting was when I was in New York, I was interviewing for jobs in Boston. And what's funny is I ended up getting the job down in South Carolina. And so I moved to South Carolina, and a month later, a company, an ad agency in California reached out to me. One that I had never, knew about, never reached out to. And what happened was one of the people I had met with when interviewing at the agency in Boston had left that company, moved to California, and said, hey, reach out to this kid. He's looking for a job. He's talented. Let's see if we can get him. But I'd already accepted the job, right? Yeah. But the power of networking, you never know what may happen from who you meet, whether it's from a job interview or at a networking event. So I ended up going to South Carolina. And I was working at this company, BFG Interactive, and we were doing a lot of cool stuff. But this was back when like Flash websites were a thing, and which is non-existent anymore.
Yeah, luckily.
Yeah, thank God. But I was so happy when Flash died. But anyways, what's funny is, we were doing all this cool, crazy stuff for all sorts of companies. So here we are, this small little boutique agency in South Carolina, and we're doing work for Coca-Cola, we're doing work for Warner Brothers, we're doing work for major like restaurant chains and different things like that. Because at that time, the iPhone, was fairly new. Everybody wanted an app, or everybody wanted some sort of interactive experience to promote their new product. And so I got really deep in the interactive space. And while I was there, I met some really smart people. And so one evening I invited a couple coworkers over because I noticed something about social media. And what I noticed was one of my colleagues was constantly winning things for free on Twitter. And it was because he was their social media manager. And I said, Alex, it's pretty cool that you win all this stuff all the time, but some of us, like myself, have to work and we can't sit on Twitter all day, right? I wish there was a way that I knew about these contests that you were winning bicycles and iPads or whatever from. And that's when the light bulb went off. And so with a couple, friends / coworkers, one evening we created what was called Guazoo. And Guazoo, we did this on the side of our jobs. It was just, it was an aggregator of social contests and giveaways. So it would scrape Twitter and Facebook for keywords. So say like retweet to win, sweepstakes, contests. And it would categorize them kind of like a Facebook news feed in a way. And it would have categories across the top like fashion, electronics, travel. And it would have the original tweet with what the contest was and an enter button. And all you'd have to do is tap enter, and then it would connect to your Twitter account and enter you in that contest. It was very simple. And within the first 8 to 10 months, it garnered 55,000 entered contests. And this, we spent no money on advertising. It just blew up on its own. And, here's the three of us. We're doing this as just a little side experiment project. And things started getting real. We started getting reached out to by angel investment groups and incubators. And this was unheard of. We're in South Carolina. We've never heard of what Silicon Valley is or anything like that. We're young, we're naive, and what was interesting was at that moment too, it was kind of a turning point for all of us where we're like, do we go full time into this thing and have zero pay, or, try to do it on the side of our job? And also at that moment in time, the different founding members of that team was having life events. A baby was about to be born, or somebody was about to be married. And it's not the easiest when those things are happening to say, I'm going to have zero pay and create a startup. So understandably so. And then also, without each one of us knowing, we were all being poached and or, reached out to by these major tech companies who kind of caught wind of what we were doing. And the company that had reached out to me, which was kind of a dream opportunity because I was an avid user of their website, was eBay. So eBay reached out and they said, hey, we really love what you're doing, but why don't you come and join us and create some new innovative things here at eBay? And that was my golden ticket opportunity to move to California, where I'd always dreamed of living and be in Silicon Valley. So the next thing you know, I'm, relocated across the country. And I spent a few years at eBay working on their verticals team. So like motors, electronics, fashion, the different segments of, the website, along with also kind of jumping back and forth with assisting their innovative group that was called Previs at the time. And then push came to shove. What happened was a former eBay colleague then became the VP of design over at Visa and said, hey, why don't you come with me? I'm creating this new innovative team here at Visa. And what I then realized was I'm following the path of a customer. I was like, yes, this makes sense. I should go now work on payment processing. I started my career with advertising and marketing. Then I went to kind of the browse and discovery phases of shopping with being at eBay. And then now I'm coming full circle with the payment and transaction side by going to Visa. So I started realizing that my career was transforming from that of being a product designer to what I kind of coin as that of an e-commerce designer. So I ended up going and joining Visa. I spent some time at Visa. And then it was at that moment, while being here in the Bay Area, where you're surrounded by these super smart people. It's super inspiring. You hear all these stories of people who, whether it's a failure or not, they create something. And it's very inspiring. And at that moment in time, I was like, you know what? I've been doing the large corporate, big company thing for a while. I want to get down into the weeds and kind of do the down and dirty, gritty sort of, startup thing. And I said, I'm going to start consulting because I saw that there's a really great need for good design here in the Bay Area and good user experience design. I mean, I hate to say it, there's a lot of bad design out there. And so these companies need help. And so I started consulting. And one of the companies I was consulting for was called Oak Labs. And Oak Labs was founded by a former eBay executive with a focus around retail innovation. They were trying to create a smart store experience. And so I was consulting with them. And what ended up happening was it started turning into a full-time role. And they said, hey, why don't you come on full-time? And so I was their director of user experience. And we created a really neat product. We were partnering with brands such as Ralph Lauren and Rebecca Minkoff, amongst other companies. And we created this smart fitting room. So if you can imagine, it was an interactive touchscreen mirror. And as you bring clothes into that fitting room, the RFID tags on that clothing would be recognized on the mirror. And it would pop up on there. And you could instantly say it was the wrong size. You could tap on that. The sales associate would be pinged and bring you the correct size. So you're not like, kind of peeking out from the curtain, saying, hey, I need assistance.
I need size so-and-so,
Right, it's a seamless experience. But what was really powerful about it was it also gave a lot of data and insight to those companies that we had created it for. So for example, you and I here, we're wearing a black shirt right now. Let's just say it was the same shirt. They would know that, let's say 100 people tried on this shirt, but you and I were the only ones who purchased it. they've never been able, all they would see before was that, hey, there was only 2 of these shirts sold. Whereas now they can actually see, well, wait, there was 98 other people who tried on that shirt. Why did they not convert, right? Was there something wrong with the fit and finish of it? Maybe it's not fitting correctly on people, right? So now they're gathering this information that is super valuable to them, and it's something that they've never been able to do before. And so Oak Labs went on to be acquired by a company by the name of Zavello, who's kind of leading in the touch screens that you see in many major fast food chains out there. So happy ending with Oak Labs. But I still had the startup bug. And so what happened was I ended up wanting to try something outside of the realms of e-commerce, so to speak. And I had created my own startup, which was called Fetch Labs. And the app was called Fetch My Pet. And you can still download the app Fetch My Pet on iPhone or go to the website fetchmypet.com. We're no longer active as a company, but the app is still available. We don't update it. We don't maintain it. But the app Fetch My Pet was around pet life management. So managing the day-to-day of your pet and the pet needs and care and well-being, as well as we were working on kind of an affordable smart ID tag for that pet. That was an RFID-based kind of geolocation sort of tracking device. And we had won awards. We won awards with Nestle Purina, Mars Pet Foods, as well as Petco. So 3 of the 4 biggest players out there recognized us. They gave us cash prizes, different rewards, but at the end of the day, again, life events happen. And as you learn as a startup founder, you need to be, aware of these things and aware of your surroundings. And after 2 years of doing this, awards and publicity is great, but it's not necessarily writing you those venture capital, checks to, you need money to make money, right? So we found that I was about to get married. One of my other co-founders was, had a baby on the way. It's kind of, reminiscent of back in, my early 20s with Guazhou. Life events were happening and you have to be aware. So we decided, hey, look, it's time to go back, on the job market and shut things down. However, before I kind of get into my segue into Groupon, something I'm very excited to share with you and say, I can't give the full details just yet. It's being finalized, but the assets of Fetch, the company that we had created, is being acquired. And it's being acquired by another company that is really having a lot of momentum and it's doing some amazing stuff. And I'm excited to say that I'll be continuing on as an advisor to them on all things product design.
Well, congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was, it's a happy ending for us. And we're really excited to see what they do with what we had created, as well as, seeing where they can grow. So I then, we segue into Groupon. What I learned was, again, I am by trade an e-commerce designer. I know the ins and outs of a customer journey and what that experience, is. So I was looking around, and again, I was like, what is a fun experience? What provides joy to a consumer? I didn't want to go to something that's, selling something that's meaningless, like a mug, right? I'm not going to go do that. But if I can, provide joy and provide, happiness to somebody, that's something I have interest in, as long as it ties back to my e-commerce roots. And again, tying back to that story about networking, what's funny is you should obviously never burn bridges, but also, try to keep in touch with those around you, whether you've met them or not, as long as you've been in communication, it's always good to reach out and connect. And so what was interesting was back when I had joined eBay, one of the people who I was talking with ended up parting ways with eBay as I had joined on. 8+ years later, where are they working? But Groupon, right? So I was like, Groupon is definitely a company on my radar. I want to reach out and just see what's going on. I go on my LinkedIn. I'm like, I swear I know somebody that works there. And I had seen this person, and I go, hey, how are you doing? And they go, yes, finally. let's finally connect over coffee. Please come in. Let's, chat. I go in, we have coffee, and the next week, I'm there having the interview, and, the following week, I'm now, a member of their team. Yeah. So it's an interesting story, but you always should obviously keep connected with those around you, because you never know where it's going to lead. And also the design community itself is a small world. I bump into people, whether it's here in the Bay Area or elsewhere. I know I'll be in London there soon, and a former colleague of mine is now there in London. So you never know where people go.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot for sharing your story. Sure. I would like to sort of pick it apart a bit and
sure.
Extract the lessons learned basically on the way. So I mean, one thing you were saying is always try to keep in touch with people, network. What kind of advice would you give someone that is maybe a bit stuck at his current job and is thinking like, I would like to move in such and such industry or into a different role? What's your thinking process behind that? And I mean, yeah, what kind of advice would you give based on your story as well?
Yeah, so I think, what's interesting there, that's a two-part story, or two-part question, I would say. The first part is, how do you kind of go about networking? And then the second part is, how do you switch industry or switch your focus area of your career, right? And so the first part of that, I would just say, is go to events, look up different things. Like, for example, the e-commerce design summit is a great example, right? Yeah. It's coming up soon. There's gonna be a lot of smart people there, a lot of people in the industry. It's a great way to network. It's a matter of putting yourself out there. And I know everybody's different, right? There are those who are extroverts versus introverts. And so it may take a lot of energy out of you to meet somebody. Yeah. But in the long run, if you want that, then you need to push yourself to get there, right? And so you may have to go out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And you learn how to communicate with people over time. It's not something that just anybody's born with. It's something that you learn. So I would say, by putting yourself out there, getting out of your comfort zone, going to events, you'll simply be able to meet people and see where it goes.
And then what do you do at events? Because I know that many people feel kind of strange, going up to strangers and just chit-chatting. I mean, how do you go about it? I mean, do you seek out specific people?
Sure.
Or you're just sort of approaching groups of people,
Obviously, if you have a friend that's there with you, it's a lot easier to approach people. There's always that like awkwardness sometimes, like if you're alone.
We all know that.
Like, hi, how are you? It's kind of weird, but hey, let's chat. But I would say, as far as like, how do you approach people, whether that's like online or in person. Right. And then I also don't want to forget of switching careers too. We'll get back to that other second part of that question. Yeah.
Repeating that,
just mental note to there. But what's interesting is, with meeting people, whether it's virtual or in person, again, it's about getting out of that comfort zone and just being okay with talking with them. And so if you're at an event, it probably, it's focused around a specific topic or subject, right? Yeah. If you're going to like an innovation summit, or you're going to a UX meetup, for example, these people all most likely work in the same industry, whether they're a UX designer, a PM, an engineer. They know they most likely are able to talk the talk, right? And so you should feel comfortable with speaking with people. They're probably going to wear a name tag. It probably says their name and or a company they work for. Right. If you really want to target certain people, you could go by that. But again, I wouldn't be necessarily fishing for like, oh, that says Google, so I want to talk to that person. It should be more organic, right? It should be more natural, and you see where the conversation goes. And if there's a spark to the conversation, then it may continue after that event, right? Where if you have common interests, there's people I've met before where I was like, you know what, this person's really interesting, whether it's some outside of, whether that person could help me in my own self, I find that person interesting, right?
Yes.
And I find what they talk about interesting, right? Less about yourself, more about them. Yeah. And then what's interesting from there is like, okay, I'll go add them on LinkedIn or something like that. And when I add them, I'll be like, hey, it was great meeting you. Let's, grab coffee sometime. I'm a big fan of the coffee chat for sure. Yeah. And that's when you sit down with them in person, that's when you can kind of go more in depth with them on things. It's more of a lighter conversation when it's a larger social setting, whereas like you can have that deeper conversation in person. So keep it light, keep it short. There's no need to try to like hold that person in a corner and just be like trying to pull any and all information out of them.
Right.
And then also with reaching out, say on like LinkedIn or things like that, because I think I saw a question pop up there from somebody in the chat. LinkedIn worked wonders when I was doing my own company from a networking perspective. As far as like, trying to network, set up partnerships, business relationships. But it's always going to be a hit or miss, kind of just like cold calling or cold emailing somebody. Again, in person is always going to be way better.
And what I found as well with networking is, at least for me, it works really well to look at the space where you're in, and look at people who have already done what you want to do, basically. And if you reach out to them and ask for a coffee, and obviously,
and buy their coffee, by the way. You should offer
buy their coffee.
Yeah, exactly. That's always a good one. Yeah.
Exactly. People are really open to share what they've learned oftentimes. Especially, if you've done your research as well, and if they see that you've put in the effort into your career as well, and you have specific questions and not just like, the meaning of life, and they will solve your problem for them. But when you have done your bit as well, and you can ask deep questions that are very related in the field. So I've made good experience in that as well.
Yeah, but you usually also want to schedule it where there is some sort of theme to that meeting, right? You don't want to kind of be ambiguous where it's just like, let's meet up, right? It's more of like, hey, I would love to pick your brain on X, Y, Z, right? And then if they're a truly thoughtful person, they would be open to helping. And even if it's whether it's from a design related thing, or say you're doing your own startup, say it's a person who is an investor. You don't want to approach them for the money. You want to approach them for their thought. And if they provide quality feedback and they provide actual interest in you, then it may lead to that, other avenue that you're trying to seek. Yeah,
I agree.
But the other part of that was around changing career, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So there is
good mental note for 1:30 a.m. Yes.
Yeah. There is I guess you could call it a school, but it's not. I don't know if you'd call it a school, but there's a website you can go to called generalassembly.com. And General Assembly, I don't know to what scale they are globally. I know they're pretty much in every major city now in the US, and I think they've expanded outside of America.
Yeah, they're also in Europe, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, General Assembly is an amazing program. So what I've actually suggested to people, and it's worked for them, where say they had like a background in design, but it was more on the advertising marketing side. I've seen it firsthand where they enrolled in their course in product design or UX design, or however they frame it. And they were able to completely turn their career around, where they went through the course. They ended up getting some good portfolio pieces out of it because they already prior to that had an understanding of design. And they were able to now, working at major companies here in the Bay Area. And they offer it not just for design, for project management, engineering, all these different types of things. And I think it's a fabulous thing because it's not a 4-year degree, but as long as you have some sort of foundation in what you're wanting to learn more on, then they can help you, guide you that way.
And also, I mean, it gives you the knowledge, it gives you the network. I mean, it helps with the network. Plus, you're right, exactly, the portfolio. I mean, you're building a portfolio.
Totally.
Okay. And then, so, I mean, if you think about, you did quite a few of those side projects, so you were always a bit entrepreneurial. How do the people who listening in need to think about that? So, I mean, side projects don't always need to turn into a business, right?
Right.
But I mean, you can hone your skill, but you can also network with that. You know, you have something to tell, you have something to share. Can you elaborate a bit more on these side projects and how you think about those projects?
Sure. I would say you should always think about new ideas and ways to innovate and or push to what could be next. I think it's a good way outside of the day-to-day of your job to always be kind of exploring what your mind is capable of, right? And that doesn't, and so I've been doing that more so now, where I'm mentoring others, I'm mentoring designers, I'm mentoring companies, I'm advisor to this company that's acquiring Fetch, as well as I'm also an advisor to another company called Throttle, which is kind of blending social media with e-commerce, automotive focused. But so what I've been doing is more so trying to help others with my time, but it really comes down to what that person has an interest in. I mean, it could even just be volunteering. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's like a business, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to be entrepreneurial, I suggest totally try something out. I'm not saying quit your job. You still need to be able to pay your bills. But hey, if it takes off and it's something that is wildly successful and or it's comparable to what you were making before, then sure, take the leap of faith and see where it goes. But obviously be cautious. Also, look to your employer, make sure it's not going to be any sort of conflict of interest, right? Yeah. Any sort of thing that I've ever done, like say advising a company, I have to clear it with the legal team of the company I work for, because they want to make sure that it's not a conflict of interest, right? And I want to make sure that I'm giving all the time that I possibly am capable of to my employer before I would go out, and do other things. So you have to make sure that that is mutual between you and your employer too.
And I mean, when you work on these side projects, are you doing that basically out of an interest, or is it just an idea that's coming up, or is it you want to experiment with certain new technologies? Because I think it's a great way. It's a great way to.
You never know what could spark an idea, right? And so with Fetch, what was interesting was during my time while at Visa, we were doing a lot of work around beacon technology. But beacons were something that was, usually stuck to a physical location, right? You're walking down the street and you're near a Starbucks coffee. All of a sudden, your phone has a notification that says, "Hey, you're near this Starbucks, and do you want to order like your favorite drink?" Right?
Yeah.
And so the idea popped in my head of, hey, that's neat and all, but do beacons have to be stationary? Could they be mobile? Could I be strapping it to something like my dog or cat, right? And so from that, the idea was born, and I started kind of toying around. I started ordering my own beacons and messing around with them at home and putting it, these bulky things on my dog's collar, and then we started, me and my co-founders, we ended up going, okay, well, let's get a few stuffed animal dogs or cats and put them near the dog park, and have some actual real life testing and see if people would find these based on a crowdsourced map, right, of multiple phones out there, because they make GPS tracking devices for pets, but they're really expensive, and you have to pay. It's a cell phone on your pet. And I have a hard enough time, remembering to charge my Apple Watch that I'm not wearing, let alone my dog, right?
Right.
So that's kind of, I saw the problem, and I saw the need of, hey, what could be an affordable solution for the masses? And that's where it came from. And I think, honestly, you now see things like, say, tile, which are wildly popular. I just think when it comes to the pet industry, it's a very slow moving industry when it comes to technology. And I think we were just a little early, I think, in that regard. Yeah. But, it's more about what it sparks you and where it leads. So it could be you see a problem, you see just something that's of interest to you, it's your hobby, you never know where it could go.
Yeah, what I find as well is most people actually have interesting ideas. It's more there's quite a few hours to do damage when you come home and actually, work also actually, move into action and do something towards it. And I mean, you learn so much as well when you are combining different fields. Lessons learned from field so and so may be applied to where you're working today, and you get new ideas in that field as well. So I always encourage everyone to really try stuff that interests you also besides your own career.
Yeah, and you know what else is interesting too, just building off of that, is that it also doesn't have to be like outside of your job, right? There's been many times in the past where I've actually been fortunate where I've been working with some smart people, and we've actually filed patents for the companies that we worked for. And I actually recently brought this up to my team at Groupon, where, hey, look, we're working on some really cool things. It would probably be good to build awareness and have you meet, the IP legal team, right? Yeah. And who knows, maybe there's a new feature that we're building that may be worth filing a patent on, right? And whether it's, the project that you're working on, or it's more of a self-motivated thing that you saw the need for and you kind of spearheaded yourself within the company, it's still going to be a win for you in the end. Whether it's your own company or you're building it for the company you're at, because it relates very much to their customers, right? So, take that as it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your own thing either. You could be tapping into the resources of your company if you see a potential, profit for them.
And how much are you sort of opportunistic when something, new comes up versus, actually sort of planning out your next steps? I mean, how much are you planning your career, if you want?
Sure.
And how much do you, go with the flow a little bit? Because you mentioned, you connected the dots regarding, moving through the customer journey when you were at Visa. So, I mean, how much are you aware about these decisions beforehand versus you are actually just going with the flow and then, connecting the dots afterwards? You're like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah,
no, that's an interesting, thought. I think, when I think about my current role with Groupon, I really want to grow within the company. I see that there's a lot of opportunity for growth for not only myself, but I think for Groupon itself.
Right.
And I want to help guide them to that point and, go from good to great, right? Whereas when you're thinking about your own career and your trajectory, what's interesting is I once had there's a very close friend of mine who he's been wildly successful with his own career, and he works in recruiting of all things, which is a very interesting topic of discussion because now you're kind of seeing it from that side of the table. And what was interesting, I'll never forget, something that he once said to me that's always stuck with me is, he goes, Greg, when you take a job, you want to think about where you want to go next from there, right? How do you want that to take your trajectory? Is this going to be that stepping stone for you to then get to that next point in your career? You may not have in your mind of like what company you want to be going to next or anything like that, but it's more of, hey, is this going to give you the foundation that you need to grow in the direction that you want to go, right? Or is this going to be just something that you kind of just are kind of stale and kind of just coasting, right?
Yeah.
So when you enter into your job, you need to be thinking about that during the interview. So asking questions around growth and opportunity is definitely something you should be, digging deeper on.
That's a super interesting thought. So basically, when you take a new job, you think
Right.
about the trajectory from there already beforehand, and
Yeah.
where it could lead you. I mean, whether that's, I guess, upwards in the company itself or at a new company.
Right.
Okay.
It's that's really, that's really how the stars are going to guide you, right?
Right. Yeah.
But in the end, it's more about, hey, is this giving you the learning that you need? Because,
Yeah.
we as people, we're constantly learning. And is it learning in the right direction, or is it, just going to be something that's the day-to-day that you're not progressing in your own
Right.
growth, right?
Right. And I also think, I always think of this, I don't know who said that, but it's, I like to put myself in positions as well where you are able to sort of drink out of a fire hose instead of a water glass,
Sure.
once in a while. It's a bit uncomfortable, but you learn a lot, you take in a lot, whether that's a new industry or a new sort of position within the company, or maybe even a new skill set within the company. So I think that's when you grow the fastest as well.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to be challenged. I mean, that's the thing. And challenges come in many different ways. It can come from an organization structure to an office politics to design challenges to customer challenges and empathizing with the needs of that customer, right? There's so many different ways that a person can be challenged mentally, that it's all learning, no matter what comes your way, whether it's actually like, pushing of the pixels on the screen to conversations that you're having with colleagues, right? It's all learning moments.
Yeah, I think it's about the awareness to ask yourself whether you're currently learning something, and if not, what could you do from where you are today? In whatever direction, or where you maybe could develop skills besides work or at work, as you say. Exactly. But ask this question. But one thing you were mentioning when we were talking before we went live is regarding stakeholder management. I feel, which is it's a terrible word, I always think, but I mean, dealing with people, let's say dealing with people inside the company to also reach your goals inside the company. How do you think about that? It's also a big part of career development, right? Because I mean, how do you push through your ideas? How do you maybe move inside a company? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, something that I learned early on is that, sometimes you have to go through a change of perception, and that can take time, and that's around, how do people perceive you and your actions, right? And, coming in earlier in my career as this young hot shot, I had an ego. I'm not going to deny that.
We all do.
And especially designers, we love what we make and we think it's the greatest thing ever. When in actuality,
and nobody understands why.
Or somebody's probably doing it better than you, right? But you think you're the best. But so obviously, when you're working with others, obviously ego, you have to let go on that, and you have to be able to listen. And that's something that I've been able to learn, and it's something I've been able to really grow upon from doing my own companies when dealing with other partners in business relationships. Because what I learned was startups move on a daily cycle, whereas these large corporate companies move on a quarterly cycle. And when you're a hungry startup, you want answers, you want to move as fast as possible, but you can't go and bug that person and be like, hey, here's the paper, here's the pen, you need to sign this deal, right? And so you have to learn patience, and you have to learn to be able to listen and hear what their thoughts are, digest that information, and then provide a meaningful, response. And so from going through that experience on a couple different occasions between large companies to startups, whether they were my own or somebody else's that I worked for, it's all something that you learn along the way. And so when managing people, when managing projects, when managing just the scenario of interacting with others, you learn how to not necessarily control a room, but you learn how to read the people around you and observe.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's different, everybody's
Yeah.
a human, and everybody's dealing with their own stuff. And so although somebody may be angry, it may not be that they're really angry at you. There might be something else going on. And so you have to be observant of that. And so when going into a room, when dealing with these cross-functional stakeholders, you know, these buzzwords, right?
Mm-hmm.
When dealing with these people, that's the better way to describe it, as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to be able to listen. And from there, you build upon that listening, where you then have a constructive conversation. And something that I always try to do too is, you know, you can end up in an endless world of meetings on meetings, or having meetings, planning meetings. The key thing here is that you go in with some sort of action item. Although the meeting may be 30 minutes, it doesn't have to necessarily run 30 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get to what the meat is of what the conversation is around, without being forceful. Obviously, you want to involve everyone around you, and so that it's a, like I said, a constructive conversation. But before everybody leaves, be like, hey, you know, time check. There's 5 minutes left.
Yep.
What are the action items, right?
Yeah.
So that everybody is also knowing what was just discussed,
Right.
and what everybody's doing next.
What's the next action? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so one interesting aspect I find is, you know, regular reflection. I mean, do you do, how do you approach that? I mean, how do you take 1 or 2 steps back from where you are and sort of thinking about your next steps, whether that's, again, within the company, how can you evolve, or learn more,
Sure.
challenge yourself, versus, you know, going, maybe you want to change a career, or, I mean, how do you approach that reflection, and do you talk to people, or what do you?
Yeah, I mean, reflection is interesting. There's many different things you can reflect upon. Going back to kind of like when you take a job, you want to think about, you know, what is that trajectory you're trying to go for? What is the goal, you know, 5, 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself? And are you going to be constantly learning within that scenario that you're currently placed in to, you know, eventually evolve yourself, your skills, and grow in that direction? But as far as self-reflection goes, I almost think that it doesn't start with yourself, but it starts with the others that are around you, right? Especially from like a management perspective. Your focus is more so on helping those other people mentor those designers, because, you know, my management is focused on design. So I'm trying to help these people hone their design skills and trying to help them figure out what they're looking for and how they want to be growing. And what can I do to help them get there? And then in turn, that also helps me think in my own mind, that reflection moment of what is it that I'm trying to gain out, you know, not gain out of the scenario, but gain, not in life per se, but gain from my growth, from my education. From
what can you learn? Yeah.
Right. And so it's those moments where you kind of have that self-reflection. But it's more so when you're focusing on whether it's others or the projects at hand, and where you're trying to go, what's the goal that you're trying to achieve. And that's when you start having that, you know, inner conversation, that inner dialogue.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple, it's already an hour almost, so
not a problem.
We have a couple questions. Well, right, it's only what, 2:30 now, and yours?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions left. So regarding the e-commerce summit, I mean, what is your contribution for the summit this year? I mean, what will you be talking about in the speech itself?
Yeah, so I'm in a panel on the first day, which is more so focused around kind of like e-commerce and retail innovation and what companies are doing. And so that's going to be with a handful of other super talented people as well.
Yeah.
But then on the second day, I'm doing a talk around kind of how there's this shift happening right now in consumerism. Thank you, millennials. And how there's also this false sense of ownership happening from a consumer side. Without going too deep into it, obviously I don't want to give it all away. I think it's really interesting, and it's kind of how we as designers are rolling out and pumping out these new features, but we don't necessarily think about what sort of psychological effect that may have on the behaviors of a customer, right? And so I'll leave it at that. But come join, the e-commerce design summit, and you can hear all about it. So
Cool, thanks. A few final questions. So, do you have some favorite books, online resources, or tools that you can recommend to people, especially when you're also thinking about maybe their career versus maybe even doing their own side project versus growing their own company? In that vicinity.
So, I mean, there's a few different things there. So as far as the book goes, I actually made sure to grab my favorite book and have it here by me for this call. So it's a book by Gary Keller, and it's called The One Thing. And what I find, it's not super long. It's an easy read. And you can see I have many different pages here that have little folds in it of different, areas that I've, taken mental notes of. And what I love about this book is its focus is what the title is, One Thing. It's about finding your own focus and finding, it's about kind of managing, whether it's your life, your project, whatever, however you want to relate it to, and realizing that not everything necessarily matters equally. And that, there's some things that are more important, and then there's some things that, as I like to say, it's a shelf item. Is this affecting me right now? Then no, it probably goes on the shelf. It's not something I need to worry or think about right now. It's about focusing on that one thing and doing it great, right? Because that's something that I've learned many startups fail from, is that they try to do too many things, and they need to become the master of one thing and then build upon that.
Interesting. Yeah, focus. It's getting harder and harder.
Oh yeah, there's many distractions. Oh yeah,
so much distraction everywhere. Cool. Thanks for the recommendation. Do you have any other websites or books that you recommend, or should we focus on that one?
Just focus on one thing, right? No, resources wise, there's many different resources out there. Like if you're trying to be entrepreneurial and you're trying to do your own thing, there's many different resources out there. Like whether it's Crunchbase or AngelList, or these different sort of websites that provide resources for startups, whether they're early or deep in their stages. And there's many others out there too. If you start Googling around, you'll find stuff. But when it comes to like design software, design resources, it's very easy to get lost in the black hole of Dribbble. If you're starting to try to find some information, you start clicking deeper and deeper and deeper. But as far as, when it comes to software, things like that, we're at the stage now where it's constantly evolving, which I find fascinating. Sketch came out of nowhere, and now it's like the industry standard, right? Adobe hasn't really, yes, they've released some stuff, but it hasn't really compared to what Sketch has been doing. And Adobe is a juggernaut of a company, right?
True.
Sketch, yes, I think they just raised their Series A round. Like that's, but they are everywhere, right? Like it's crazy. And then there's these new, there's these new tools, these new stuff that's coming out, like say Framer, for example. Framer's a great tool. Some of the designers on my team have been getting really deep in that, and it allows them to build out some really great realistic feeling prototypes, so much more so than say what InVision can do, where it actually feels real. And our research team loves it because now they're having something that is semi like production ready that they can put in a tester's hands.
Cool, thank you. Let's quickly go into this one or two questions. What exactly did you study, respectively graduate in?
So
and when, if what?
So I went to Ringling College of Art and Design, which is located in Sarasota, Florida, which was great, for 4 years of being in college, being near a beach. I can't complain about that. That was a lot of fun. But they had a great program there, and it was, which they still offer this major, which was called Graphic and Interactive Communication, which is a really, mouthful of words there. This was before there was things like, this was kind of before they were really using terms like user experience or stuff like that.
Right.
And so graphic and interactive communication was their way of just kind of like covering all the bases of graphic design.
Right.
So we were doing everything from print design to web design.
Yeah.
There was no app design at that point, right? That wasn't even a thought by anyone.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that, I'd always had that entrepreneurial spirit, that kind of business interest in mind. And so they offer a minor in business there as well. And so I had minor in business. And that's why I had chosen that school, was because I was focusing on the art and the creative side while also being able to still kind of attend to my desires of, that business focused area. Yeah.
What would you recommend people today? I mean, whether that's their first education or continued education, what fields do you see evolving respectively? Where do you see a future where it's good to start now or educate yourself now, or maybe good auxiliary skills to actually design itself?
Yeah. This may be a controversial comment that I make, but something that, I always find interesting is, a bachelor's degree versus, say, a master's degree, right? And there's many people today who feel that they need to have a master's degree in order to have a good career. I don't have a master's degree, and I've been doing just fine. Yeah. I think what's interesting is I've seen before where people at companies are hired on, some who just finished their master's and somebody who's been there now for 2 years because they had joined on from their bachelor's degree. And that person who had joined on after their bachelor's degree, typically from what I've seen, is actually at a higher level and or experience now than that person who just came out from their master's. And the reason I've witnessed that is because it's more about, in the design world, it's not like, you're becoming a doctor where you need 8 years of school, right? With design, it's more about show me what you're capable of and show me what you can do, right? Let me see your portfolio. Let me see your process. Process is very big, especially when it comes to interviews. We want to see your process. By the way, we're hiring, so reach out to me if anybody's interested. Make sure your portfolio shows your process, because otherwise I'm just going to skip to the next one. But yeah, so what's interesting is, and that's a website we can add here to the chat, is design.groupon.com.
Oh, yeah.
Feel free to reach out to me on there. But that's something that I feel is interesting. If you want to change careers, then yes, you may want to, enroll, in a college course and change careers. But I think if you want to get right into, a product design career, I think it's totally fine just to go through the bachelor's program, and the master's is completely up to you. Because on the flip side, some companies are even willing to pay for your master's and or pay for part of that tuition. So rather than, burying yourself even in more debt, just get the real world experience. I'm a big believer of just diving in and just kind of, figuring things out as you go.
Cool. One last question.
Sure.
You switched jobs and learned a lot. That's from Daniela. Yeah. To all, do you see a difference between switching jobs in America or Europe? Maybe I'm not sure if you can answer that, but is it interpreted as as a positive thing in the US, or do you think, also when you are hiring, is someone who has had a lot of stops and learned a lot at different companies? How do you view that versus, someone who is actually has been putting in the work at one company for several years and went deeper?
Sure. Yeah, totally. That is a total mixed bag. It's really interesting, and I'll go into detail, but it's definitely something I have to deal with when hiring, right? And what's interesting is the time period that I started my career, it was totally, recognized and known, because that was just a down economy, and companies were shifting their budgets all over the place. And so people were jumping around a lot. I don't know how it is in Europe per se, but I do know in the Bay Area, the average tenure at a company is like 2 to 3 years max. People out here, it's very competitive. And so people jump around a lot. However, people don't jump around if they are moving up in the company, right? So generally what will happen is if somebody gets promoted, they're going to stay longer than somebody who's not. But there are those who do get comfortable and they stay a long time. And so on the flip side, on the other side of the table, when it comes to the interview and I'm here and you're interviewing with me and I'm looking at your resume, what I will find interesting is a couple different things. If you've moved, let's just say you were at a company for 1.5 to 2 years, and then you went to another company. If it was a promotion, you went and got a higher level position, then I think that's totally justified, right? If you were at a company for 6 months, 12 months, a year, and it was a lateral movement where you took the same role at a different company, then I'm going to question, okay, I'm going to ask you what caused that? And if you tell me that, you didn't get along with your manager, now I'm going to be wondering, okay, is this person a culture fit, right? Or I will question and be like, in my mind, is this person a potential flight risk? I don't know. So it really varies. Or let's say it was a year here and a year there, but they were both startups. Maybe one of the startups, went under and, didn't have the funding to continue on. Again, totally justified. And I'm seeing that you are having an entrepreneurial spirit and that you also are working at a startup, which usually are crazy hours. So I know you're hungry to work hard, right? So it really varies. But again, going back to like, if you were at a company, say for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and let's just say you had no promotion, right? Or you were at somebody for 7 years and maybe you had a promotion after like year 2 or 3, but you're still there now for an additional 4 years. Now I'm going to wonder like, okay, is this person just very comfortable? They're just collecting a paycheck. They're not really trying to progress themselves, which is totally fine. There's people, different types of people. Some people don't want, the constant challenge. Maybe it's perfect for their work-life balance where that's totally fine. But when I'm interviewing, and sometimes for a team, that's what you need. You just need somebody who's going to do good work, day in and day out. But if you're looking for somebody who, say, wants to grow, or you're needing somebody who's going to be like really trying to kind of like shake things up and really do some awesome work, I don't know if you're going to go for that person that has been at a company for 8 years and maybe or may not have had a promotion, because their hunger to really try new things may not be there. They may be just very complacent and just kind of, so it may not necessarily help your team, right?
Yeah, totally.
So there's a lot of different variables as to how you read a person and their resume.
No, but I like you thinking around that. It's very nuanced. Yeah, you're right. You can't just take one look at this and like, oh, this person jumped here and there. It's always the story behind, right?
Right. You have to figure out what the reasoning was and if it was justified.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then does that person then, based on their experience, meet your needs?
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. We're already 10 minutes over, but that's okay. It was super interesting, Greg. Thanks a lot for staying up until almost, what is it now for you? Almost
2:40 a.m. It's okay, not a problem.
I mean, you definitely deserve to go to bed now. Thank you very much. Maybe one last thing. Where can people connect with you? Also, if they would like to apply at Groupon in your design group, where can they reach out?
I actually have an open spot on my team right now. So if you're a super talented product designer, go to design.groupon.com and you can learn more about our entire design team, our research team, our content strategy team. And we have open roles currently, so be sure to check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, my website is my name, gregtariff.com. You can follow me on Instagram at gregtariff or on Twitter at gtariff. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to answer any questions that I can. I get messages every so often on LinkedIn from different people just looking for advice. I'm always happy to help. And I also have on my website too, there's a form there. You can easily just message me through my website and ask any sort of question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Greg. It was super interesting. Thanks for your
Sam.
advice and interesting story on how you came to Groupon. And
Awesome.
good luck with your speech as well at
Thank
the
you.
e-commerce conference.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Look forward to it.
Thanks a lot for
Thank you.
tuning in. Cheers. Bye-bye.